My name is Amanda, and for the longest time, I thought I had built the perfect life. From the outside, everything looked picture perfect. A beautiful suburban home in Austin, Texas, a career I was proud of as a marketing manager, and a husband who was charming enough to make everyone believe we were the couple who had it all. Steve, my husband, was a financial advisor, polished, ambitious, and always quick with a smile that could disarm anyone. We had been married for 8 years, and for most of those years, I believed in the dream we had created together. We were the kind of couple people envied. Dual incomes, no kids yet, plenty of time to travel, shop, and enjoy the finer things. We had joint accounts, shared everything, and to the outside world, we were financially solid and emotionally stable. Friends would often tell me how lucky I was to have a husband like Steve. And, truthfully, I thought so too, at least I used to. It was subtle at first, the cracks in our perfect life. Steve suddenly became obsessed with fitness. Don't get me wrong, I've always encouraged a healthy lifestyle. But this was something different. He started spending hours at the gym, longer than any normal workout would require. He was suddenly strict with his diet, constantly tracking his macros, and spending evenings watching bodybuilding videos instead of watching shows with me. I told myself it was just a phase. After all, we were in our 30s now, and maybe he was feeling insecure about getting older. I brushed it off with a laugh when he started flexing in the mirror more often. But what I couldn't brush off was how distant he had become. Steve's phone was glued to his hand. He would step outside to take calls in hushed tones, locking the screen the second I walked into the room. His late nights at the office became routine. When I'd ask, "Hey, when will you be home?" he'd reply vaguely, "Don't wait up, I've got late meetings." At first, I believed him. I trusted him. We'd built a life together, shared dreams together, why wouldn't I? But trust has a way of eroding when silence starts to replace laughter. I began noticing things that didn't add up, the smell of cologne that wasn't his usual, the way he'd suddenly change clothes after coming back from the gym, and the distance in his eyes whenever I tried to connect with him. One night, he came home late again. He tossed his gym bag on the couch, and as he walked toward the shower, I noticed something odd. Sticking out of the side pocket of his towel was a faint smear of lipstick. Not mine. A bright, bold red I'd never wear. My heart dropped into my stomach. I wanted to scream at him right then and there, but I didn't. Instead, I pretended I hadn't noticed. I smiled, asked how his workout went, and he gave me the same canned answer, "Great. I'm feeling stronger every day." I nodded, but inside, my blood was boiling. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, 100 thoughts racing through my mind. Was I overthinking? Was I being paranoid? Or was my husband of 8 years hiding something from me? The next morning, Steve left for work earlier than usual. He kissed my cheek distractedly, barely looking at me. The second the door closed behind him, I felt a surge of determination. I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. I walked over to where he had tossed his gym bag. The lipstick-stained towel was still there, shoved in the side pocket. My hands trembled as I pulled it out, staring at the evidence of someone else in his life. My chest tightened. But it wasn't just the towel I found. His phone charger was tucked into the same pocket. That gave me an idea. Steve was careless with his phone at times, and I knew his passcode. It was the same as our anniversary date. That evening, after he fell asleep, I picked up his phone and entered the code. My heart raced as the screen unlocked. I told myself I'd just take a quick look, just enough to put my mind at ease. But nothing could have prepared me for what I found. There they were, text messages between Steve and someone named Jasmine. I felt my stomach flip as I scrolled. Jasmine. His personal trainer. 25 years old, fit, energetic, and everything Steve seemed obsessed with lately. The messages weren't just friendly. They were intimate. Flirty. Explicit. Messages that mocked me. Messages where he called her baby and told her she was the reason he pushed himself so hard at the gym. And then there was the one that shattered me completely. "Don't worry, Jasmine. I'm already working with my lawyer to protect my assets. Amanda won't get a penny more than she deserves." I froze. My breath caught in my throat as I read it again and again. Not only was my husband cheating on me, but he was actively planning to divorce me and make sure I walked away with nothing. I kept scrolling, my fingers shaking. More messages. Pictures. Plans. He had been paying Jasmine's rent, buying her expensive gifts, and even talking about moving in together once things with Amanda were settled. Settled. That word felt like a knife in my chest. To him, I wasn't a wife, a partner, or someone he once loved. I was a problem to be settled. I put his phone back carefully, quietly, making sure he didn't wake up. I lay down beside him, staring at the man I thought I knew. A stranger. A liar. A cheater. My husband. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. As I lay there in the dark, one thought seared through the fog of pain. If Steve thought he could destroy me, he was gravely mistaken. Because I wasn't going to be his victim. I was going to be his downfall. And that night, with Steve sleeping soundly beside me, I began to plot the revenge that would turn his carefully crafted plan into his worst nightmare. After that sleepless night, I walked into the office like a ghost. My coworkers probably thought I was just tired, but inside, my entire world had collapsed. Every time my phone buzzed with an email or calendar alert, I felt a wave of nausea, as though Steve's secrets were spilling into my own life. I couldn't focus on anything but the messages I had read. His words replayed over and over. Don't worry, Jasmine. I'm already working with my lawyer to protect my assets. Amanda won't get a penny more than she deserves. That line was burned into my memory, etched so deeply it was like acid eating through my chest. I had always been the planner, the one who made sure our bills were paid on time, our vacations were booked months in advance, our lives organized. I had built our marriage on trust. And while I was building, Steve was tearing everything apart behind my back. That night, after Steve went to bed, I grabbed my laptop and started digging. If he was protecting assets, I needed to understand what that meant. I wasn't a lawyer, but I was a marketing manager. I knew how to research, how to dig deeper, how to connect dots. I started with our joint accounts. Something felt off immediately. Balances that used to hold tens of thousands now looked oddly depleted. I cross-checked the last few months of statements, and my blood ran cold. Large transfers had been made to accounts I didn't recognize. I knew every one of our accounts, every login, every password. We had always shared that information. But these were new. Secret. Hidden. I clicked through transaction after transaction, my heart pounding harder with each one. Rent payments for an apartment in a neighborhood we didn't live in. Luxury purchases from high-end stores, none of which I had made. Jewelry. Designer clothes. Restaurant bills that matched the nights he had told me he was working late. And then, the rent payments became clear. Jasmine's name was on them. Steve wasn't just helping her out, he was funding her lifestyle. While I sat at home waiting for him, he was building a second life with her. I felt sick. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial. He was siphoning our future away, piece by piece, and handing it to a 25-year-old trainer who probably thought she had won the lottery. But the worst discovery was still to come. Buried in his emails, I found correspondence with a lawyer. My husband was already laying the groundwork for divorce. He was asking questions about asset protection, about how to move money legally so I couldn't touch it. He was drafting a version of our life where I was erased completely, left with nothing but the scraps he felt I deserved. I slammed my laptop shut and sat there in the dark, trembling with fury. He wasn't planning a separation. He was planning a heist. He wanted to rob me of everything I had helped build, everything I had sacrificed for. I thought back to the early days of our marriage, how we used to dream together. The nights we'd stay up until 2 a.m., talking about our future, saving for a home, building a life as equals. I thought of the promotions I had turned down because Steve's career needed more flexibility. I thought of the long hours I had worked to make sure our bills were covered while he studied for his financial certifications. And now he wanted to write me out of my own life story, like I was nothing. But I wasn't nothing. And I wasn't about to let him win. The next day, I put on my best mask. When Steve kissed me goodbye before heading to the gym, I smiled. I asked him if he wanted me to pick up groceries for dinner. I acted like the same loving, supportive wife he thought he was deceiving so perfectly. The truth was, my mind was spinning at 100 miles an hour. I started reading everything I could about divorce law in Texas. Asset division. Debt responsibility. Property rights. It was like learning a foreign language, but every line I read gave me a little more power. That's when I discovered something Steve hadn't counted on. Debt. In Texas, debt acquired during the marriage is considered shared, no matter who racks it up. If I swiped our joint credit cards tomorrow and maxed them out, Steve would be responsible for half, no matter what. And another detail stood out. Personal property purchased during the marriage typically stays with the purchaser. Meaning if I bought something for myself, it was mine, not his. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. Steve thought he was so clever, hiding money, paying for Jasmine's rent, making me think I'd walk away broke. But his arrogance had blinded him to the one loophole that could undo everything he was trying to build. If he wanted to strip me of my future, I could bury him in debt so deep he'd never climb out. I thought about Jasmine, the smug trainer who was spending my husband's money, wearing jewelry he had bought with funds we once saved for our dreams. I imagined the two of them laughing about me, picturing me broken, desperate, abandoned. The idea of revenge lit something inside me. A fire I didn't know I had. I spent hours sketching out a plan. It couldn't be reckless. It had to be strategic. Every dollar spent had to serve a purpose. Not just to punish Steve, but to secure my future, to ensure I walked away from this disaster not as a victim, but as a survivor. I calculated exactly how much credit was available on our joint cards. $75,000. A fortune. Enough to change the trajectory of my life if used wisely. I didn't want to just waste it on random things. I needed to think like a strategist, not a scorned wife. So I started researching what held value. Designer handbags. Jewelry, electronics, collectibles, things I could keep, things I could use, things Steve could never touch. I even made a list of essentials I would need if I left him: furniture, decor, clothes for job interviews if I decided to change companies. The pieces of my plan fell into place like a puzzle. And as I stared at my growing list, a calm washed over me. For the first time since discovering his betrayal, I didn't feel powerless. I felt in control. Steve thought he was playing chess with me, but he had no idea I was about to flip the board completely. That night, as I tucked my laptop away and climbed into bed beside him, I smiled to myself. He mumbled something in his sleep about tomorrow's workout, and I almost laughed out loud. If only he knew that tomorrow's workout wouldn't be the only heavy lifting happening in our house. Because tomorrow, I was going to start my own kind of training. And my training had one goal: revenge. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. For days, I had been drowning in betrayal, choking on the lies that had been shoved down my throat. But now, I wasn't just the cheated-on wife. I wasn't just the woman left in the shadows while her husband played house with his trainer. No, I was the woman holding a weapon Steve never saw coming: knowledge. After a quick breakfast of coffee I could barely taste, I opened my laptop again and dove deeper. The legal articles, the case studies, the blogs written by divorce attorneys, each one felt like another brick in the foundation I was building for myself. The words ran through my head like a mantra: debt acquired during marriage is shared. Steve thought his little game of shifting money into hidden accounts would leave me high and dry. He thought I would cower when his lawyer served me papers. But he had overlooked the simplest truth. If I spent our money strategically before he could file, I would walk away with assets, things he couldn't touch, and he would be chained to half the debt. That thought made me smile for the first time in weeks. But I knew I couldn't just go on a reckless spree. If I was going to spend $75,000 of our joint credit, it had to be deliberate. Every purchase needed to serve a purpose. So, I created categories. Category 1. Personal value. Things that would help me rebuild my life after Steve. A professional wardrobe, designer suits, shoes, and bags that could carry me into interviews, presentations, or even a new career if I decided to start fresh. Jewelry that wouldn't just look stunning, but hold value if I ever needed to sell it. Category 2. Practical independence. Everything I would need to set up my own home. Furniture, electronics, cookware. I wasn't going to start over in an empty apartment with hand-me-downs. I would walk into my new life fully equipped, ready to live well on my own terms. Category 3. Emotional fuel. Luxuries that would heal the wounds Steve had carved into me. Spa packages, beauty treatments, skincare, things that would remind me I was still a woman worth loving, even if my husband had forgotten it. Category 4. Hidden investments. Collectibles, high-end art, limited edition items that could appreciate in value. They'd be mine to keep or sell, insurance against whatever storm Steve tried to create. It wasn't just shopping. It was strategy. Once my plan was outlined, I did what I always did best. I researched. Hours upon hours combing through online stores, reviews, resale markets. I compared which handbags held their value the longest, which pieces of jewelry were timeless, which electronics could be easily resold if necessary. The list grew, but it wasn't chaotic. It was a blueprint for my survival. And the more I planned, the calmer I felt. That night, Steve stumbled into the house after another late-night gym session. I could smell the faint scent of Jasmine's perfume on his clothes, sweet and cloying like poison. He tossed his keys on the counter and mumbled something about being exhausted. I smiled sweetly, poured him a glass of water, and asked how his workout was. He gave me the same half-hearted grin and said, "Hard." I pushed myself tonight. I wanted to laugh in his face. He had no idea that I was the one doing the real heavy lifting. After he went to bed, I pulled out my notebook and calculator, double-checking the available balances. 3 credit cards. $75,000 combined. More than enough. I pictured his face when he eventually discovered what I had done, the fury, the disbelief, the way his arrogant little world would crumble. That image fueled me. But there was one more thing I had to do before launching my plan: prepare for his reaction. Steve was manipulative. He was smart. If he caught even a whiff of what I was doing, he'd shut it down immediately. He'd cancel the cards, freeze the accounts, do whatever he could to protect himself. So I needed a cover story. Over the next few days, I started planting seeds. When he made comments about how tired I looked, I sighed dramatically and said, maybe I just need to treat myself more. Focus on me for a change. When he asked why packages were arriving, I laughed and said, retail therapy, honey. It's cheaper than a therapist. I even praised his gym obsession. You look amazing, Steve. Keep going, you're inspiring me to take better care of myself too. Every word was calculated. Every smile rehearsed. He thought I was harmless. Distracted. A little frivolous maybe, but nothing threatening. And while he flexed in the mirror for Jasmine, I sharpened the knife behind his back. The first real test came one Friday evening. Steve was on the couch scrolling through his phone, texting God knows who, when he asked, "Hey, did you order something from Neiman Marcus?" I got a notification. My heart skipped a beat, but I forced a casual shrug. Yeah, just a couple of dresses for work. Nothing crazy. He rolled his eyes. Amanda, you and your shopping. Don't go overboard, okay? Things are tight right now. Tight. The word almost made me laugh out loud. Of course they were tight. He was funneling money into Jasmine's new lifestyle. I leaned over, kissed his cheek, and said sweetly, "Don't worry, I've got it under control." And he believed me. That night, after he fell asleep, I opened my laptop and placed my first set of orders. Designer heels. A Chanel handbag. A diamond bracelet that sparkled like fire on the screen. I added spa packages and salon appointments to my cart like they were weapons in my arsenal. Click. Confirm. Done. It was exhilarating. For the first time since I discovered his betrayal, I felt powerful. I wasn't crying, begging, or shrinking into the shadows. I was taking control. As the confirmation emails rolled in, I felt a surge of satisfaction. Each one was a promise that Steve's plan to ruin me was about to implode. When I finally closed my laptop, I looked over at him sleeping soundly beside me. His face was calm, smug, blissfully unaware. And I thought to myself, enjoy your dreams, Steve. Because soon, they're going to turn into your worst nightmare. The first wave of packages arrived on a crisp Tuesday morning. I was sipping coffee when the delivery truck pulled up, unloading box after box at our doorstep. The driver looked at me like I was moving into a new house. I forced a calm smile, signed for everything, and carried the boxes inside one by one. My hands were trembling, not with guilt, but with adrenaline. Every box was a reminder. I was taking something back. I sliced open the first one. Inside was the Chanel handbag I had eyed for weeks. Its buttery leather gleamed in the morning light, the chain strap heavy and luxurious in my hand. I held it up to my shoulder and caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. For the first time in months, I didn't see a broken wife. I saw a woman with fire in her eyes. The second box revealed a pair of Christian Louboutin heels, sharp, crimson-soled daggers that screamed power. They weren't just shoes, they were armor. I slipped them on, standing taller, imagining myself walking away from Steve in them. More boxes followed. A diamond tennis bracelet that glittered like a constellation. A tailored pantsuit so perfectly cut it looked like it had been made for me. High-end skincare, silky dresses, gold earrings that caught the light with every movement. Each item felt less like a splurge and more like an investment. An investment in me. But this was only the beginning. I kept meticulous records in my notebook, every purchase, every dollar. I tracked which cards I was using, rotating them to avoid raising red flags. My spending was deliberate, methodical, like a surgeon making precise cuts. Still, the thrill was undeniable. Clicking place order felt intoxicating. The rush of anticipation, the dopamine hit when the confirmation email arrived, it was addictive. And the more I shopped, the easier it became to play my role. When Steve raised an eyebrow at the growing pile of boxes, I waved it off. "Don't look so shocked," I teased. "You're always at the gym. I need something to keep me entertained." He laughed, dismissing me as frivolous, and went back to scrolling through his phone. Inside, I wanted to laugh too. The more he underestimated me, the safer my plan became. The spree wasn't just about luxury, though. I made sure to cover my bases. I ordered sleek new furniture, a modern sofa, a queen-sized bed with a velvet headboard, an oak dining table that could host dinner parties I fully intended to throw in my own space one day. Electronics followed, an iMac, a MacBook Pro, the latest iPhone, and a 70-inch smart TV. Practical, yes, but also resellable if I ever needed to liquidate quickly. Kitchenware arrived in polished sets, Le Creuset pots, Japanese chef's knives, a full suite of stainless steel appliances. I didn't want to live on takeout when I left Steve. I wanted a home, not just a hideout. Every purchase was a brick in the house I was building for myself, even if that house didn't yet exist. And then there were the indulgences. Spa gift certificates tucked into a drawer. A weekend retreat package at a luxury resort in Arizona, booked under my name alone. A collection of rare perfumes, each one a bottled reminder that I was still alive, still desirable, still me. I wasn't just spending money. I was reclaiming pieces of my identity that Steve had chipped away. But as the days passed, I realized something else. The act of shopping wasn't just empowering me, it was teaching me discipline. I wasn't careless. Every decision mattered. If an item didn't add value, I skipped it. If I couldn't see myself using it in my new life, I closed the tab. The Amanda who once begged Steve for approval was gone. The Amanda who now controlled $75,000 in spending power was reborn. Still, I had to be careful. One night, Steve came home earlier than expected. I was on the couch with my laptop open, comparing diamond pendant options, when he walked in. "What's all this?" he asked, leaning over my shoulder. My heart nearly stopped, but I forced a laugh. "Christmas shopping. Don't peek, you'll ruin the surprise." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Amanda, it's September." "Exactly," I said smoothly. "You know me, I like to plan ahead." He shrugged, grabbed a beer, and plopped down in front of the TV. My pulse slowed, but I knew that was too close. From then on, I did my shopping late at night, after he passed out, or during the day while he was at the gym. Every precaution mattered. The more I bought, the more I imagined my escape. I pictured moving into a stylish downtown apartment, decorating it with the furniture I had ordered, slipping into my designer clothes before walking into a brand new life. I pictured hosting friends, laughing, free from Steve's shadow. Each purchase wasn't just an object. It was a glimpse of my future. But there was a darker side too. Some nights, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was becoming just as deceitful as Steve. After all, wasn't I lying to his face every day? Wasn't I hiding things, covering my tracks, building a secret life behind his back? The thought gnawed at me, but then I remembered the way he looked at me like I was disposable. The way he smelled of another woman's perfume. The way he tried to manipulate finances so I'd be left with nothing. No, this wasn't deceit. This was survival. I wasn't sinking to his level. I was climbing above it. Then, one afternoon, as I was organizing receipts in my notebook, a thought struck me like lightning. What if I didn't just spend the money? What if I used it to trap him? The law was clear, debt was shared. Every dollar I charged would be half his responsibility. But if I played it right, I could ensure that not only would I walk away with assets, but Steve would be left drowning in the debt he thought he could escape. Suddenly, this wasn't just about shopping. This was about war. And I was winning. I looked around the room at the towers of boxes, at the glint of diamonds on my wrist, at the handwritten notes of everything I had acquired. Steve thought he was the puppet master, pulling strings behind my back. But what he didn't know is that I had already cut the strings. And soon, he would find out what it felt like to be the one dancing helplessly. The first credit card bill came in on a Friday evening. I'll never forget the sound of the mailbox clanging shut, the way Steve shuffled through envelopes with his usual distracted air. Normally, he'd toss bills onto the counter for me to handle. But this time, he paused, brows furrowing. Statement from Capital One, he muttered. I froze mid-step. That card had at least 15,000 in charges already. I plastered on my calmest smile and breezed past him, setting a pot of water to boil on the stove. Just toss it over, I'll handle it later. But instead of dropping it, he tore the envelope open. My pulse spiked. His eyes skimmed the first page, and I watched the color drain from his face. Sephora. Nordstrom. Neiman Marcus. Amanda, what the hell is this? His voice was sharp, dangerous. I turned, spatula in hand, and tilted my head like a scolded teenager. What does it look like? I treated myself. Don't you always say I deserve nice things? Nice things. He jabbed a finger at the page. This is over 15 grand. In 1 month. I shrugged, tossing pasta into the boiling water. What can I say? Retail therapy. It's been stressful with you gone so much. And besides, you spend hours at the gym. Everyone copes differently. For a moment, I thought he'd explode. But then, like flipping a switch, he scoffed and tossed the bill on the counter. You're unbelievable, he muttered, grabbing a beer from the fridge. Whatever. Just try to keep it under control. He stomped off, muttering under his breath, but I exhaled in relief. He was still underestimating me. But cracks had formed. From that night forward, Steve paid more attention. He started side-eyeing the steady stream of packages. He made little comments. Another handbag? Didn't you just get one? Or, since when do you need 3 new laptops? I smiled sweetly every time. Don't worry, honey. These are investments. The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. But I knew the game was shifting. His suspicion was growing. So I adjusted. Instead of having items shipped directly home, I rerouted deliveries to a local FedEx office under my name. I picked them up during the day, while he was at the gym. I rented a storage unit a few miles away and began carefully moving boxes there. It was like having a second home, a secret sanctuary where my future was taking shape. Rows of designer clothes, sparkling jewelry in velvet cases, sleek electronics stacked neatly in their boxes. It smelled faintly of new leather and ambition. Every time I locked the unit and slid the key into my purse, I felt safer. One day soon, I'd walk out of our marriage with everything I needed tucked away in that little concrete room. But Steve wasn't the only one noticing changes. Jasmine, his precious trainer, began leaving traces. Once, I found her perfume clinging to his sweatshirt, sharp and floral. Another time, I caught sight of a text on his phone, just a flash before he snatched it away. Can't wait to see you tonight, baby, 2 hearts. The audacity of it nearly made me scream. Instead, I smiled. Always smiling. Always playing the perfect wife. I cooked him dinner, asked about his workouts, kissed his cheek when he left the house smelling of cologne. I even encouraged him. "You look amazing lately, Steve." Jasmine must really know her stuff. The guilt flickered across his face for half a second before he covered it with a grin. That tiny crack was all I needed to know. My mask was stronger than his. Still, the tension built. One night, as I slipped a new bracelet onto my wrist, he stormed into the bedroom, jaw tight. "Amanda, level with me." "What's going on?" I arched an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" He gestured wildly around the room. "The clothes. The jewelry. The spa trips. It's too much." "This isn't you." I tilted my head, letting the diamond catch the lamplight. "Maybe this is me. The me you stopped noticing. The me who got tired of waiting around for scraps of your attention." His mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no words came out. He looked almost guilty. Almost. Then he straightened, scowling. "Well, it needs to stop. We can't afford this." I laughed softly, slipping the bracelet off and placing it in its velvet box. "Oh, Steve. Isn't marriage about sharing everything? Don't worry, we'll manage." The double meaning was delicious. Still, I couldn't let him get too close. I needed more time. So I leaned into his ego, complimented his muscles, his dedication, his discipline. I encouraged him to spend even longer at the gym, even signed him up for a weekend fitness retreat he'd been eyeing. "Go," I urged, kissing his cheek. "You deserve it." The more time he spent with Jasmine, the less time he spent watching me, and the more secure my plan became. But the clock was ticking. I knew from his emails that he was meeting with his lawyer again soon. The words asset protection and timeline made my stomach twist. He was getting closer to filing. That meant I had to accelerate. I pushed harder, maxing out the remaining cards in record time. Another Rolex. A collection of rare wines. A limited edition painting from a rising artist in New York. Every swipe, every click, felt like a drumbeat in a countdown I couldn't stop. Then came the moment I'll never forget. Steve came home earlier than he ever did. I was in the living room, surrounded by open boxes, folding gowns into garment bags to move to the storage unit. The front door clicked open, and there he was, frozen in the doorway. "What the hell is all this?" His voice cracked, equal parts rage and disbelief. I turned slowly, the calm mask already in place. "Just organizing. You know, making space." He stalked closer, eyes darting from the Chanel labels to the jewelry cases. "Amanda, did you buy all this?" I let the silence stretch, then smiled sweetly. "Of course." "Why? Don't you like it?" His face turned crimson. He stormed past me to his laptop, typing furiously. I didn't need to look, I knew he was logging into our credit card accounts. Seconds later, his strangled shout echoed through the house. $75,000? He whirled on me, eyes blazing. "Amanda, what have you done?" "We're broke." I folded a silk dress calmly, smoothing it over the hanger. "Relax, Steve. I thought you'd be happy I was finally taking care of myself." "Happy?" He was nearly shaking. "You've lost your damn mind. You're returning all of this, now." I looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time. And for the first time, I let the mask slip just enough. "Why?" I asked softly. "Isn't marriage about sharing?" "You've been sharing our money with Jasmine." I just thought I'd share it with myself. The blood drained from his face. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. In that silence, for the first time, I knew Steve finally realized he wasn't the only one playing the game. And I was winning. The night Steve caught me surrounded by boxes was the night the balance of power shifted. He tried to shout me down, his face red, his fists clenched. But underneath the anger, I saw it fear. The kind of fear that comes when a man realizes the game he thought he was winning is slipping out of his hands. He barely spoke to me that weekend. He paced slammed doors, spent hours locked in his office. At night, I could hear him tapping furiously at his laptop. I didn't have to guess what he was doing. His lawyer's emails had already given me a preview. He thought he could beat me to the punch. By Monday morning, he was gone before I woke, dressed in his sharpest suit, a briefcase in hand. The gym bag was left behind. That was all the confirmation I needed. Steve wasn't going to the gym. He was going to his lawyer. I let myself smile as I made coffee. It was almost funny. He thought he was outmaneuvering me, when in reality, every step he took was pushing him deeper into the corner I had built for him. I pictured the meeting. Steve swaggering into his lawyer's office, chest puffed, ready to file papers that would leave me with nothing. And then, slowly, the smugness draining from his face as reality set in. Still, I wanted to hear it from his mouth. He came home late that night. His tie was loose, his hair a mess, his face pale. He didn't even bother with a hello. He went straight to the liquor cabinet, poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey, and sank into the couch. I watched him from the kitchen, savoring the silence. Finally, I asked, "Long day?" His jaw tightened. "Don't start, Amanda." I set down my glass of wine, walked over, and perched on the arm of the chair across from him. "What did your lawyer say?" He flinched, eyes narrowing. "How do you?" "Oh, come on, Steve." I leaned in, my voice low and even. "You think I don't know? The secret accounts, the transfers, the calls you take outside. You weren't as clever as you thought." His face drained of color. For once, he was speechless. I let the silence linger, then added, "So, how'd it go? Did he tell you the fun part?" He slammed his glass down, whiskey splashing onto the table. "You've destroyed us, Amanda. $75,000 in debt. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Oh, I know exactly what I've done." The truth was, Steve's lawyer had explained it better than I ever could. Marital debt was shared equally. No matter who swiped the card, both of us were on the hook. Which meant half that 75 grand was Steve's responsibility. But the lawyer had also confirmed what I already knew. Purchases made during the marriage that were clearly personal property, they stayed with the person who bought them. So while Steve would be paying off half the debt, all the handbags, jewelry, electronics, furniture, every single thing would remain mine. It wasn't just spending. It was strategy. And Steve had walked right into it. "You can't keep all that crap," he spat, standing now, pacing the room like a caged animal. "The court will make you return it." I tilted my head, watching him unravel. "Actually, no. That's the beauty of it. These are personal items, Steve. Do you really think the judge is going to award you custody of my shoes?" He froze, blinking at me, searching for a comeback he didn't have. "Face it," I continued softly. "You wanted to protect your assets. I protected mine." He sank back into the couch, burying his face in his hands. For the first time, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the perfume on his shirts, the texts from Jasmine, the smirk when he thought he was getting away with it. No, I didn't feel sorry. I felt powerful. Over the next few days, the tension was suffocating. Steve stopped trying to hide his affair. He was constantly on his phone, whispering to Jasmine in the kitchen, the garage, even the bathroom. I let him, because I knew what was coming next. The credit card companies began calling. Past due notices landed in the mailbox. Our joint bank account shrank under the weight of minimum payments. Steve raged, cursed, threatened to cut me off, but it was too late. The damage was done. The cards were maxed, the purchases secure, the storage unit full. One night, I overheard him snapping at Jasmine on the phone. "Just give me time, okay? It's complicated. I'll get it sorted." Her sharp reply was muffled, but the desperation in his voice wasn't. The man who once strutted around like a king was starting to sound like a beggar. And still, he underestimated me. He thought if he filed quickly enough, he could salvage something. He thought if he pressured me, scared me, maybe I'd cave. But every move he made only tightened the noose. The irony was almost poetic. Steve had spent months planning to leave me high and dry. But when the dust settled, he'd be the one left gasping for air, broke, burdened, and abandoned. And I'd be free. That Friday, I poured myself a glass of wine and slipped into a new silk robe I'd bought with our money. Steve was sulking in his office, muttering to himself. I opened the balcony door, letting the cool night air wash over me. Below, the city hummed, alive, vibrant, full of possibility. For the first time in a long time, I felt it too. Not guilt. Not fear. Power. And the best part? Steve hadn't even seen the full extent of it yet. The morning of the hearing, I woke before dawn. I didn't toss and turn with nerves. I didn't pace the house or second-guess myself. I slipped into my tailored Chanel suit, clasped the diamond earrings that sparkled like tiny victories, and smoothed my hair until every strand was in place. My reflection in the mirror wasn't a broken wife anymore. It was a woman who had survived betrayal and sharpened herself into steel. When I walked downstairs, Steve was already waiting by the door. He looked nothing like the confident man I had married. His tie was crooked, his skin sallow, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. He didn't say a word, just grabbed his briefcase and stomped to the car. I followed, sliding into the passenger seat, my perfume filling the silence between us. The courthouse was cold, all stone walls and echoing footsteps. As we sat outside the courtroom, Steve muttered under his breath, scrolling through emails on his phone. Every now and then, I caught Jasmine's name flashing across the screen. Her messages grew shorter, more irritated. I didn't need to read them to know what she was saying. She was tired of waiting. Good. Let her wait forever. When they finally called our case, Steve shot me a smug look, like he still believed he'd walk out the winner. I smiled back, calm, almost serene, because I already knew the ending. Our lawyers spoke first, each making their case. Steve's lawyer tried to paint me as reckless, unstable, an impulsive spender who had saddled the marriage with unnecessary debt. I sat quietly, legs crossed, listening to every accusation. Then it was my lawyer's turn. She slid a thick stack of receipts across the table, every handbag, every piece of jewelry, every appliance, documented and cataloged. Then she spoke clearly, calmly, as if she were explaining simple math to a stubborn child. Your Honor, all of these purchases were made during the marriage on joint credit. That means both parties are equally responsible for the debt. Furthermore, each purchase falls under personal property, which remains with the purchaser after divorce. In plain English, Mrs. Carter keeps her belongings, and Mr. Carter shares responsibility for the balance. The judge leaned back, steepling his fingers. His eyes flicked to Steve. Is that understood? Steve's face turned crimson. This isn't fair. She tricked me. I finally spoke, my voice calm but carrying across the room. Fair? You want to talk about fair, Steve? You were planning to leave me for another woman and hide assets so I'd end up with nothing. I just made sure you couldn't. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Steve's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, whispering in his ear, but it was too late. The truth was out. The judge rapped his gavel once. Regardless of marital disputes, the law is clear. The debt stands. The property division stands. Case adjourned. And, just like that, it was over. Steve looked like he'd been punched. He sank into his chair, rubbing his temples, whispering curses under his breath. His lawyer patted his shoulder half-heartedly, already gathering his files. I stood, smooth and composed, gathering my bag. When I walked past Steve, I leaned down, my lips close to his ear. You thought you were the only one who could play dirty, I whispered. But you underestimated me. And now you'll be paying for my freedom, every single month. His jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. I straightened, smiled at the judge, and walked out, my heels clicking on the polished floor like a victory march. Outside, the sun hit my face, warm and bright. I inhaled deeply, the air tasting sweeter than it had in years. For the first time, I felt light, unburdened. Behind me, Steve lingered on the courthouse steps, shoulders slumped, his phone pressed to his ear. I didn't have to guess who he was calling. Jasmine. Her voice carried faintly across the distance, sharp, annoyed. Then, loud enough for me to hear, you said you had money, Steve. I'm not wasting my time with a broke man. And just like that, she was gone. The look on his face, devastation, panic, humiliation, was the final twist of the knife. I walked to my car, every step deliberate, every movement poised. I wasn't just walking away from a courthouse. I was walking away from the wreckage Steve had tried to trap me in. And for once, he was the one left picking up the pieces. That night, as I unpacked the last of my boxes in my new apartment, I poured a glass of champagne. My furniture gleamed under the soft glow of designer lamps. My wardrobe hung neatly in the closet, row after row of silks, leathers, and tailored lines. Everything I needed was here. Everything I wanted was mine. And Steve? He was probably sitting in some dingy rental, staring at bills he couldn't pay, realizing that the life he built on lies had crumbled into dust. I lifted my glass in a silent toast. To freedom, I whispered. And to never underestimating a woman again. I took a long, slow sip. And for the first time in years, the taste of victory was mine. The days after the trial moved like honey. Slow, golden, sweet. For years, my life had been dictated by Steve's schedule, Steve's moods, Steve's plans. Now, for the first time, every decision was mine. I woke up in silk sheets, the city skyline glowing outside my new bedroom window. I brewed my coffee the way I liked it, dark, bold, no sugar. I sat at my marble kitchen counter, scrolling through messages from friends who were cheering me on. Some women I barely knew wrote to say I'd inspired them, that I gave them courage to finally leave. I never asked to be a symbol. But maybe that's what happens when you stop being silent. One night, I found myself at a rooftop bar downtown. The city pulsed below, neon lights flickering like restless stars. A man I had just met leaned across the table, his smile easy, his laugh warm. For a moment, I let myself imagine what it would feel like to start fresh. No baggage, no betrayal. Just possibility. But I didn't rush. I wasn't desperate. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't looking for someone to complete me. I had already completed myself. Meanwhile, Steve unraveled. News spread quickly in our social circle. He had lost not only Jasmine, but his reputation. Friends whispered behind his back, clients grew distant, even his own family seemed weary of his excuses. Every time I saw him, it was like watching a man shrink into the shadow of who he once was. His tailored suits no longer fit, his voice lost its command, his eyes carried a permanent bitterness. And the cruelest part? He knew he had done it to himself. One Saturday afternoon, weeks after the trial, Steve showed up at my apartment building. The concierge called upstairs, his voice hesitant. "Mrs. Carter, your ex-husband is here. He says it's urgent." I almost laughed. Urgent? Now he wanted urgency after years of dragging me through betrayal and lies? Still, I went down. He was standing in the lobby, hair unkempt, shirt wrinkled. His eyes searched mine with something like desperation. "Amanda, please," he started, his voice cracking. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Jasmine's gone, the money's a mess, and," he swallowed hard, "I need you. We can fix this. We can go back." For a moment, I just looked at him. This was the man I had once thought was my whole world. The man I had defended, forgiven, trusted. Now he was nothing more than a stranger begging for scraps. I leaned closer, my voice low but steady. "Steve, there is no going back. You made sure of that when you betrayed me. I'm not your safety net. I'm not your backup plan. I'm your lesson." His mouth opened and closed, like he couldn't find words. But I didn't give him time. I turned, heels clicking on the polished floor, and walked away. The concierge gave me a small nod, like he understood. And I knew that chapter was finally, irrevocably closed. In the months that followed, my life flourished. I finished redecorating my apartment, turning it into a sanctuary of light and luxury. I started traveling again, Miami, Chicago, Los Angeles, sipping cocktails by hotel pools, strolling through art galleries, dancing under glittering chandeliers. Everywhere I went, I carried myself differently. My laughter was freer. My steps were lighter. My eyes no longer scanned for cracks in the foundation of my marriage. Because I wasn't living in anyone else's shadow anymore. One evening, sitting on my balcony with a glass of wine, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal. The revenge, the courtroom, the freedom. And I realized something powerful. Steve had tried to destroy me. But in his attempt, he had given me the greatest gift, the chance to rebuild myself stronger than I ever imagined. I didn't just survive him. I thrived without him. So here I am, telling you my story. Not because I want pity. Not because I want revenge. but because I know there's someone listening right now who feels trapped. Someone who thinks they can't leave. Someone who believes they aren't strong enough. I'm here to tell you, you're stronger than you think. The moment you stop letting someone else control your story is the moment you start writing your own. And, trust me, there is nothing more intoxicating than freedom. I raised my glass that night, the city lights twinkling like diamonds around me. To Amanda Carter, I whispered to myself. The woman Steve thought he could break. The woman who walked away richer, freer, and untouchable. I took a long sip, savoring the taste. Because this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning.